We have to move on to the next panel, and we have some very interesting guests here on the panel, please. And we have Pranjal Sharma, who is actually going to help us moderate this. Pranjal, could you come up stage, please? Prem. So we have Pranjal, who's actually going to be moderating. He's the consulting editor for Business World. In fact, he was with Bloomberg, if I'm not wrong, at one point in time, and he's going to help us do that. And we have 5 very interesting speakers here. We have Anita, who's the CEO and Managing Director for Mahindra Life Spaces. We have Sunand, who is the President of Alstom, or just the former President of Alstom and now the advisor. Himanshu Jain, who's the Managing Director and VP for Sealed Air. Anuj Mehra from Mahindra Housing, and Kevin Stolarik, who's with the University of Rotman. So you did hear him in the morning, but we have him again here. So thanks a lot for being here. Let's go over to the panel. Pranjal, over to you, please.
Thank you. Do I get a mic? Can you pass the mic, please, first?
Prem, can we get the mics, please? This is not done.
Thank you. And I think this can be shared. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your patience. It's always a bit tense when we're doing a changeover of sessions without a coffee break. And you see all the dirty linen being changed and the chairs being shifted. But thank you for being with us. Amit has already introduced the panelist, but today we are discussing a subject which is on top of the mind, not just for all of us in the hall, but also the state and the country, because just the day after when Make in India campaign has been launched by the Prime Minister with so much of fanfare, and he's been inviting foreign investors from across the globe, more importantly domestic investors who had seen a decline in the last few quarters are now feeling far more optimistic about manufacturing, creating industrial development in India. So the topic that we have to address is what needs to be done or what can be done for enabling industrial development. Now, as I was discussing with the panelist just in our huddle a few seconds before, it's really a description of manufacturing and the ecosystem around it. So I'm going to request each of them to share their experience and their thoughts on where they feel the enablers have to come from, whose responsibility it is, how much the government has to do, how much does the industry and the players within the corporate world have to contribute, what is their role, what kind of frameworks can be addressed, and as much of your experience that you can share with us and give us some ideas about what needs to be done, I think it'll be excellent for us. So I'm going to begin by requesting Anita to start the conversation. Anita, how do you see this? What exactly needs to be done, especially from the sector that you are from?
Yeah, I think first let's look at some context. If you look at the National Manufacturing Policy, which was announced by the Government of India about 2 years back in 2012, one of the stated objectives was to take manufacturing from 16% of GDP to 25% of GDP and to create 100 million jobs. Because often what we keep talking about as the demographic dividend of about 400 million people who are in the working age group is seen as a concern area in terms of being a potential demographic disaster, because almost 90% of the workforce has not gone through any formal process of vocational training. So I think there's one large issue around how do you look at skill development and vocational training to actually push labor productivity up, which is significantly lower at this point in time in India. The second is around the whole aspect of ease of doing business. On most parameters, we still have a long way to go. And if you really want manufacturing as an ecosystem to do well here, then you really need to start addressing issues around starting of businesses, time that it takes to get construction permits. We are among the bottom 10 in the world.
So you are a developer. So I'm going to just take one more quick point with you. You are a developer. What is the biggest challenge you face?
From our perspective, and I'd just like to pull back on a third aspect that I wanted to touch on, which is land and land acquisition. Because we have two roles as a developer. One is conventional, creating housing stock for people to live in. But the other is the Mahindra World Cities that we have, two of them, about 5,000 acres, which are actually focused on industrial job creation. So the two of them together today have about $1.5 billion of exports happening from out of there. But what the struggle really is when you try to put together 3, 4, 5,000 acres of land, acquisition from tenant farmers, thousands of people involved, no sovereign guarantee to title.
So building is easy. Shopping for land is a tough thing, right?
Shopping for land is the tough thing. The next thing is the whole issue around approvals. As I mentioned, we are 179 out of 189 countries in terms of construction permits. So the amount of time that it takes you to get approvals, industry is looking to be able to get started quickly, to be able to plug and play literally. And if you're going to take a year to get approvals, that is costly money sitting there, not earning returns.
Thank you. Sunny, yes. Taking a year to get approvals, does it worry you too?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting. I'm sitting next to you. Many years ago, I'll just do it in about 2 minutes. I'll walk you through experiences. I think that's the best thing to do because that more or less amplifies everything and then sets the context. It's not all bad stories. I'll tell you a couple of good ones too.
With a happy ending.
Yeah, the thing is this. Twice it's happened to me personally in the last 5 years. Twice. If it was once, it was forgivable, but twice. I went to them to build a factory in a hurry. Plug and play, as you said. In Chennai, we won a tender to build Chennai Metro, and I wanted to put in a metro coach factory. The easiest thing would have been to go across to their plant, their site, and say, the one plot lying vacant next to BMW, give it to me and I'll build my plant. And that's when my nightmare started. The kind of permits they had was not the kind of permits which would work for us, vice versa. The plot of land we needed required a little bit more acquisition. That was the second problem. And then the problems multiplied. In exasperation, we took a very quiet decision. We didn't inform the government of Tamil Nadu, which was putting every manner and type of barrier in our way, not in a bad way, just in a nice way. For this, you need another 5 forms to fill. For that, you need another 15 things to do. For this one, you need another 2.5 things to do. So what we did was, we crossed the border to supply metro coaches to Chennai Metro. We almost overnight built a factory and metro coaches in an SEZ, just across the border.
I thought you were going to say Sri Lanka.
Siri City. No, that could have been possible too, but that would have been tougher. But Siri City in Andhra Pradesh, nearby Nellore. And the factory is producing. Second one, in Gujarat, with great fanfare, some years ago, land acquisition done, within an SEZ, investment done, foundations laid, boundary walls built, and then something called, which I discovered deeply well, a public interest litigation, commencing on something like this. 100 years ago, a stream used to flow by this boundary wall. What if it rains and it flowed again? Now, 18 months of trial and error with the courts of law. We sank the money. We kept it. Litigation is ongoing. We had to deliver product. Went across to another piece of land in Gujarat where the factory is under construction, although 15 months late, and we will be ready for it by March of next year. I can carry on. The other one thing which we noticed, the one you touched upon about skill, I don't think across the board the word safety has any true meaning in our environment, generally speaking. It's visible on the road. You just have to drive out of here and observe the people trying to stop your car with their hand held like this in lieu of a traffic light. And you see that across everywhere. But it gets worse. We've lost at least a subcontractor's person in Bombay with Bombay Suburban Rail who insist on running their trains while your people are working on the track and repairing the electronics. It's a true experience. I can carry on and on and on ad nauseum. The next one. Largely Indian public sector, which is the largest contractor in the country, in especially the segments I work in, which is power and rail, in which I would collapse of immense excitement if one project got completed on schedule anywhere in the country. I don't think it's an exaggeration. The largest one I'm working on, which was at one time tom-tommed in the world as India's largest hydroelectric project, is currently 4 years delayed, likely to be another 4 years delayed. We've already manufactured 22,000 tons of equipment and supplied it to the site. The dam is yet to be built.
But my question,
Okay.
Sunny, are you hopeful now?
Now.
Because we know what the last
I
government
told you
did.
I'll give you good news. Here it comes. It's all inside the factories. When you visit the factories where all this stuff is being done, you will be excited. Why? You heard, during the Make in India, you heard the Suzuki gentleman talk about how excited he is about exporting. So are we. But that's all within the boundary walls of what we run ourselves, where we have least interference over our shoulder, telling us on what we do, and we transfer the best practices we can, and we do it, we take cost out. I'm happy to say we manufacture the heaviest of heavy engineering, and we manufacture it in competition with China, and we don't need to be told how, because we run factories in China, we run factories in India, we know how. So it can be done. It's being done in automotive, it's being done in light engineering, it's being done in very heavy engineering, so that's the good news. And the adaptability of the Indian worker is fabulous. We have Indian project directors building power plants in Iraq, project managed from Noida in record speed. So somewhere within that, you have to search for your answer. I don't have enough time. I have the answer, but I don't have enough time. If somebody asks me later, I'll tell them how it can be done.
No, but quickly, Sunny, I'll just stay with you for 5 more seconds. You're also giving the sense that some parts are still working. If you go to Andhra, things happen. If you go to Gujarat, things happen. So that means there are some best practices which some of the state governments need to come up to.
I don't think it happens because of best practice. I just think it happens because of pure luck. And I'll tell you why. Because if I hadn't lost that land, if they hadn't said no to me, I wouldn't have discovered what I would have. Why would I have crossed the border? Why would I have sunk 100 crores into constructing a foundation and then having to, by luck, find another place? I'm sorry, I somewhat disagree. I think this whole best practices thing also needs to be put under the magnifying glass rather sharply.
Okay, I have to come back to you on that point because I think there's a lot of excitement hidden there. But Himanshu, I know you want to, do you want to add to it? But I have a specific question for you, which is that what are the 2 things you would want to change now? Because we've got somewhat of a context, but with your experience, if you could tell us what are the 2 constructive changes which are required?
I think that's an easier question. I don't have so many anecdotes like Sunanda has because I don't have that depth of manufacturing experience in the country. We are anyway sealed there as a much smaller scale manufacturing company than Alstom would be. But if I look at the changes we need to do, I think the basic first change I would like the government to look at is combined departments. Please combine departments. There are too many separate agencies looking after similar things. There's a factories inspector, there's a boiler inspector, there's an electrical inspector. Why can't a factory inspector do all the 3 things? Why do you need 2, 3 different agencies doing it? So you deal with one, you satisfy him, you know what is right, what is wrong, move on.
But even the concept of self-certification, I mean, that is even better.
I'm not even saying get there. I think, that requires a high level of trust. And I must say that all the corporate citizens do not behave always in the most honorable manner. So I'm giving that, I'm granting that to the government. Please keep your watch, but at least combine the number of agencies. Instead of dealing with 35, 40 agencies, let me deal with 2, 3, 4 or 1 agency. And I satisfy the requirements. My life becomes, I know what I have to do. It doesn't become a back and forth. Secondly, there are huge amount of areas where interpretation makes a big difference in the laws. This is excisable, this you can claim, this you can't claim.
Which is discretionary powers.
Discretionary powers. So what tends to happen is, every time there's a discretionary situation, first thing is to stop the work. I think the approach has to change from stopping to letting the things continue and settling the stuff later on through a well-defined, time-bound redressal mechanism.
But
This-
I noticed that most of the issues that you're raising relate to the state government, right? It's not a national issue. It's
No, I
something
agree with
which,
you.
which
If-
works.
If you ask me national issue, there's a national issue it is
But
because.
this is a national, in a way. I'm saying that each state is plagued by these kind of problems with their own unique, customized problems.
No, I don't think these are customized. When you look at a Factories Act, it's been originally enacted nationally, and then all states have modified it a bit here and there. So I think the need is to basically change the whole concept of having one department and managing it, excise, and, India is the only country which has a manufacturing tax. As if manufacturing in the country is a punishment. Why should you manufacture here? I'm getting into the GST space, let me leave that out. The second biggest thing is, I think we have not kept pace with our education for industrial development. Our ITIs have become very old, defunct, the curriculum has not been revised. Even an ITI or a diploma engineer, when he gets into a company, he has to spend a few years learning first before he can be put to productive use. So to me, I think there's a need to redo the whole education around industrial progress and development. These two things, one is combined and the second is skilling.
Thank you. That's I think very insightful because it also connects the macro to the micro. So I think that's very insightful. Anuj, if I could ask you about your space, and housing is again something which affects everybody. And when you talk about rural housing, it's not just an economic need; it's a social need as well. But even there, I assume it's not an easy cakewalk for you.
Well, talking specifically about rural housing, the biggest problem is land records, because there is nothing called a land record. There is no mutation of land records. People are scared of going to the local bureaucracy.
So you and Anita are part of the same group. Do you go land shopping together?
No, we are in a totally different segment. Anita is urban and semi-urban at best. We are rural, entirely rural. But coming back to the industrialization part of it, we obviously do a lot of work in rural India and try to understand the customer. And there's one thing which is worrying us, and that is something which you talked about, skills. Today, one of the biggest expense head of a rural family is education. They are trying to educate their children. The children are going ahead doing their BAs or whatever, and then going ahead to do a so-called MBA. Yeah. And that's the biggest problem, because the aspirations of that family and ultimately the kind of job he gets and his employability, there's a very, very big gap. And I think that's a disaster waiting to happen. And unless and until there is very serious skilling done at that level, we are going to have a social turmoil.
So it's a socio-economic issue of respect and appreciation of blue-collar workers.
Exactly. And the fact that what is the aspiration? I mean, today, if you want to get educated, the aspiration seems to be do an MBA, do an English medium school. You go to Patna city, right? I mean, this is something I've noticed very often. You go to Bangalore, the minute you land in Bangalore, all the hoardings are about gold schemes, gold deposits, so on and so forth. You land in Patna, all the hoardings are English medium schools. Come for tuition, come for English medium school, come for English medium college education, so on and so forth. Now, the obvious next step is to do a BA or something like that. The next step is to do a MBA or something like that, or get into government. I mean, there are children who waste years and years just trying for the IAS. And that, to my mind, is one of the biggest areas where we need to do something and do something very fast.
But this is something which clearly a collective action by industry can take place. For example, the real estate industry, CREDAI and all these others, what stops the industry associations of coming together, pooling resources, setting up these skilling institutes, which will actually feed you? Where will a plumber go? He can't go and work in the IT sector.
It's also, like I said right in the beginning, it's also got a lot to do with aspirations and managing aspirations. Now, the Mahindra Group, for example, has its pride schools. It teaches people basic skills like being a lathe operator and so on and so forth. But if people are so enamored of doing something totally different because there is a lack of respect or whatever, what do? The second aspect that I'd like to touch upon is something which earlier people have already alluded to, is the fact that if we want to succeed, the attitude and the structure of governance has to change. The private sector and industry must be trusted by the government, which I think today half our problems are the government looks at industry.
I thought you were going to say corporate governance has to improve.
That, of course, has to improve also. But that's one aspect. And the other aspect is the government should get out of making and just be a referee. So you set the rules, set the set the ground rules, and then get out of it and just monitor that the rules are being followed.
No, that's very important. Actually, trust is a very important thing because the entire system that we have between civil society, the industry, and the government, this triangle of sorts, is fundamentally separated by distrust. Everybody distrusts everybody, and therefore, and I think that's a colonial legacy where the rulers never trusted the people who were under them. So I think that needs to be completely turned on its head. Kevin, you have the advantage of looking at us from outside, but also being an insider of sorts. What would you say are the three things that would help in enabling industrial development? What can help change this mindset and the way people work, both in the private sector and the government? And again, government both at center and state.
Oh, boy.
You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I know, yeah, 5 seconds or less, right? So I guess there's a whole bunch of things. I mean, we've already talked, I think, hit on a lot of them. I will echo what everybody has said in terms of skill and skill development, because I think that is incredibly important, and a lot of the work that I've done really talks about that. And to also recognize that skill development doesn't necessarily mean university degrees. And in fact, I think one of the interesting things that some of what I have done in terms of research and looking at countries around the world, not just India, stuff that I've done in China, I've done some stuff looking in the Middle East and other places. And one of the real questions that I've always had is that in order to become a post-industrial economy, do you have to industrialize first? It's actually a really interesting question, right? Because if you look at the Middle East, they'll say no, right? We can make a lot of money selling oil, and we can turn that money into Masdar and build Abu Dhabi, and right? It actually doesn't work. There for a whole lot of other reasons, I think. But if you look at China, the Chinese quite clearly said, absolutely. The only way we can become a post-industrial society is we have to be an industrial society first. And if you look at India, what you see in India is that India initially, right, with Bangalore, with Hyderabad, basically said, oh no, we can skip this industrial stuff. We don't need to deal with the messy industrial stuff. We can just go to the knowledge economy. We can do all these IT jobs and all this else.
So has that become a bit of a curse? The whole success of the service sector has become a curse for the industrial manufacturing base?
Absolutely, right? And it caused, so there was a great deal of preference for IT over, and BPO, right, over manufacturing.
Right.
But as a result, right, you end up with these educational problems, because then we're back to skill. What the people in the villages who have, have decent education, and at least through the kind of primary and secondary level, but not much beyond that. And they're not going to get jobs working for IBM doing services outsourcing.
Yeah, but that's a problem with India. Most Indians want to lead and there's nobody left to follow. So something has to be done about that. But Sunny, you wanted to add something. And I'll come to you, Himanshu.
Since it's the time of dramatic out-of-the-box thinking in every whichever way, I have a solution which is very quick, but it would cost, starting at about $2 or $3 billion a year and end at about $40 or $50 billion a year finally in foreign exchange lost, which can be easily substituted by the amount of export that would then be generated. And here's where I go with this off-the-wall idea. There's millions of Indians, highly skilled people, living in dormitories and everything else, building the Middle East, and their pipelines and refineries and factories and things. They are being imparted all the skill sets of exactly the kind India needs. Suppose you made it convenient for bunches and bunches of these people to come back to the same salary levels that they leave India for, and bring all those skills with them and start building India instead of building the Middle East. You have about 4 or 5 million skilled workers available at one shout. Actually,
the moment you walk out of the door, the real estate industry will kill you.
All right. So one shout out to say, come build India, and you'll have the same conditions. As a matter of fact, you'll live better, you'll eat better, you'll have everything better. The skills exist. I know it because we skill them and they leave us to join them.
Well, that's a problem, you know. I also want to blame that's a great point.
That's
Applause,
number one. That's
yeah.
number one. Number two, let me share this from the Skill Development Council, a particular statistic which will not surprise you, but it should shock you also. I'll say it slowly. There are more humans in India working in watch and ward and security services in the organized sector than all of Indian manufacturing combined. The man who shoves the mirror under your car, who holds the gate open, who looks into the boot of your car, etc. There are more people in the organized sector there who are paying who are under EPF, employee state insurance, etc., than all of skilled manufacturing in India. It is a shocker.
It's a fantastic point, but I need to come to him quickly, and then because we have to end and there's a hard stop at 4, I need to get 2-3 questions.
Now, I have 2 comments here. There's an ecosystem which is needed for somebody to prosper. The moment you get those people from Dubai here, they will have to deal with the same set of, water supply coming on and off, power being there or not, and a set of people around him who will pull him down. So the guy's productivity changes overnight. Now, I don't think there's an easy solution to this whole problem. That's one comment. And second thing, I don't think we should blame the BPO success for the manufacturing. Once we neglect it, it went that way. People didn't have a choice. They all graduated to the white-collar jobs. They're disillusioned there. You give them a respectable treatment. We don't treat our blue-collar workers better in our own lives. That's a fact. If we don't treat them well, we want them to look like, wearing a tie or a clean shirt all the time. Then this is what you get.
Most importantly, I don't think we even pay them enough because we try to depress the salaries as much as possible, and that's where the profit comes from. We have about 5 minutes left. Only people who want to disagree with what the panel said, please raise your hands, and I can take 3 of those disagreements. If you are agreeing, then there is no point articulating that, because I'm sure. So if there is no disagreement, okay, sir, there is one disagreement. I'm going to collect the questions, and I see a hand at the back. And please be brief, sir. Please do introduce yourself. Can we have a mic here? I love to encourage disagreement.
Hello, good evening. I am Ravinder Singh. I am inventor. So there is huge mass of land is available. Our builders, they have acquired say 10,000 acres of land. When they require only 100 acres per year. So there is a huge mass of land is already acquired by industry.
But they don't use it. That's a good point.
That's another thing. And second thing, we don't have a policy which is very critical in all over USA, for example. If a factory is shut down, immediately banks take over the factory and hand it over to some other person. So in India, what we do is we go into litigation for 10 years or 20 years. We don't have a policy to acquire
we got the point.
shutdown.
We are aware of that. Thank you very much for those 2 points. Let me take the question at the back. Yeah, let me go for the question at the back. Yeah. Please make sure these are disagreements. Nothing which you... Sir, can I go to the person in the back, please? And I'll come to you. Thank you. Please introduce yourself. We can hear you, so you can go ahead without the mic. You have a young voice.
Yeah, my name is Ram N. Kumar, and my question was, he raised the question about people coming from Middle East and some other places to India and working for India. How can it be possible? We can even train people here. We have so much manpower available in India, in the hinterland, in rural part of India where people do not have anything to work. Why don't you train them and get people to work?
Good point. Thank you. Next, at the back, please. The backbenchers are performing better today.
Good evening. Myself is Rajiv Singhal. I am a company secretary by profession.
I just want to know how the competitiveness can be observed in the real estate sector, because acquisition of land will be at different prices, raw material cost is different, FSI is also different, and precisely this is the reason why the builders are charging different rates at the same project.
Thank you.
And the real example is Mahindra itself only, because they are selling one product at 6,000 rupees at Dwarka Expressway, and they are launched another one at 12,000 rupees plus at Sector 15.
But this is, please don't bring a consumer complaint here.
I'm just curious to know.
I understand that.
How the competitiveness
final
can be
point
observed.
over here, please. The gentleman in the front. Thank you.
I am Vivek Mittal from RK Foundation India.
Sir.
My request to the panel is that, various aspects have been discussed and I was listening to them very keenly. But what is the panel's opinion about reorganization of the Planning Commission? And what impact will this reorganization have on industrial development? Because I feel this is an important aspect.
Very good effect. But
Yeah, go for it.
Sir, no, Sunny,
I've been waiting for this day with bated breath for 50 years.
Well,
Thrilled with it.
So that's from the day you were born, right, Sunny? All right, so I'm going to go along the panel quickly and react to the questions and then we close it. Please.
Okay, I think there was one question around land and one around real estate prices, so I'll take those two. I'll start with the second. It's a question of which segment you're catering to. So you can't say a BMW and a car which is at the mid-end segment is priced at the same level. Location, specifications, product, who you're catering to. If land is being bought at, say, 6,000 rupees, then you're going to sell that product and you're going to build at 6,000 rupees, you're obviously going to sell that at 15,000. Whereas somewhere else you may buy land at 500 rupees, do a 2,000 rupees construction and then mark up on that. It works like any other category. As far as land is concerned, sir, you mentioned that there are large tracts of land acquired by various people, and it again is a question of what kind of land are you looking at. There is land which is acquired for townships, which are necessarily high value, which are oriented towards creating FSI on it and building townships, and there is land that you need for industrial development, which is what we were referring to, where you need connectivity to ports, you need connectivity to airports, you need good transport corridors, you need good sources of power, water, and you cannot be too far away from existing tier 1 or tier 2 cities because you need the talent pool to be able to travel and commute. And that's a very different category of land that we are talking about. What we need there really is a lot of regional planning that needs to come in from the government. We often look at land as isolated parcels. We don't look at the whole cluster and what needs to be done to develop it.
Thank you. Sunny, the point about training people instead of just bringing people.
Oh yeah, that's an easy one. Let me amplify what I meant by that. Let's say you don't have very skilled piping engineers, piping people, you don't have very skilled oil pipeline people. I mean, I can say it publicly because it became a cause célèbre 3 or 4 years ago. There were Chinese welders working in India to create and weld an oil pipeline. It's a fact. 35,000 skilled Chinese workers were in India building power plants. There's a cycle time which is needed to create that person who can do that job. Yeah. What I suggested was, in the time it takes to get the Indian worker up to the same level of quality of skills and productivity, you already have people who are disciplined enough. And the other part, the underlying thing was, they are blue collar and they are proud of it. In India, you have to make blue collar proud of it. I have worked for at least 3 chairmen of companies overseas, all of whom were proud to say, my father started on the shop floor. I mean, in India, it's a rarity to find somebody to say, I am the chairman of a company, my father started on the shop floor, and I'm proud of it.
Thank you.
The day that happens, you've got it.
Very good thought. 30 seconds for all 3 of you. Each.
But what question? You want?
No, I'd like you to react to some of the thoughts which were raised over here.
No, I think, to me, there is no single right or wrong answer. You need to develop local people, but as he rightly said, you can always import the right kind of talent to come back in. But I think, we need a fundamental social change, and we need to debate how to get it. Basically, to get more respect for the blue-collar staff. It's not just in terms of salary, in terms of the way they get treated. Because typically, for everybody, the aspiration is to be a manager and somewhere being able to manage a few people, than being a specialist and a great engineer. we end up paying huge sums of money to expat engineers for commissioning our ordinary equipment, very ordinary equipment, which can all be done locally.
Right.
Second thing is, I think we still have a quality issue. Whatever we make, we still don't make it to international standards easily. As a result, when there's a discerning customer, he still goes to the global markets to buy.
That's
And
a very good point, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll just reiterate respect to the person and managing his aspirations. And coming to your quality issue, I think that is again linked to the skill.
But Anuj,
Because
there seems to be some level of distrust for the real estate industry. There were two questions which were seemingly questioning the practices of real estate industry.
I don't know why, because I have been in the real estate industry also. And I think it's just a question of a few bad eggs which have given the entire industry a very bad name. And if you look at any of the corporate developers, or if you look at any of the largish developers in the country, they're absolutely transparent, and most developers today are using transparency as a USP.
Thank you.
That, okay,
And
we
I
will
think the consumers should recognize that. Kevin, how to get more good eggs?
So, I don't know, but I got two quick things at least. The first one is on the Planning Commission. While I think getting rid of it is an absolutely wonderful and fabulous thing, it doesn't eliminate the need for planning, as was pointed out. So there are, especially when it comes to infrastructure, so much of what needs to happen to build the infrastructure that needs to be there, the central government has to play an incredibly important role in that, as well as the state governments, and you need some kind of mechanism in place to make sure that that's actually being thought about. When it comes to industrial development, that's even more important, because you have to start thinking about what kind of clusters you want to support in what regions and how you're going to do that. The other thing is, while I completely agree, and I don't have time for my fabulous iPhone story about quality and some of the quality issues in India, I do feel, as the one colored guy up here, that I need to point out that India just recently did something that the rest of the world has not been able to do. And that is, you sent a satellite to Mars at 1/10 the cost.
First time right.
First time right. The Russians and the US had 3 or 4 massive failures that cost a ton of money. So it can be done. And that, I think, is the other interesting point, is to not forget that these things are possible, that this country has the ability to do some pretty amazing things when it puts its mind to it. The real challenge is, how do you get them to put their mind to it?
Thank you, Kevin. But you know, the good thing is ISRO did not have factory inspectors coming and looking at their at the units.
Exactly,
But Sonny, we have to close now. I think we should just, Amit will also agree that this has been, we have set the agenda by being a very competitive and efficient panel. We have finished on time, and a round of applause for all the panelists here. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Pranjal. Thanks a lot here. Can I request Martin to come on stage to honor the guests? Martin? Thank you, Martin. Kevin? Anuj? Himanshu? Thank you very much. Thank you, Sunan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Thanks, Pranjal, most of all. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So now may I call Mr. Gangal to be here to really make some very quick remarks for 2 or 3 minutes on the proceedings for the day. Rahul.